Hey guys, what's up? It's all about Mike 18 here with another TV episode review. Guys, it's late Monday night. You guys know what that means for me in regards to TV and what I watch on Monday nights. That's right, guys. It's Bates Motel night, and I just watched the newest episode of the show. Tonight was Season 2, Episode 6, Plunge. And I just finished watching it, guys. Yeah, I know. I'm still not a huge fan of the late time, 10 o'clock time. But I think a lot of us have to get used to that. I'm slowly starting to get used to it. I hate doing reviews late at night, though. But anyway, yeah, guys, real quick, before I do get into this review, I just want to promote my Captain America the Winter Soldier movie review and my spoiler review. I already published both videos on YouTube. If you'd like to watch both of them, the spoiler-free one and the spoiler-filled one, they're both on my channel. Links should be in this video, so please check them out for me. I would greatly appreciate it. So I just wanted to make that known because I was a big fan of the movie and I want you guys to check out my review. Anyway, getting back to Bates Motel, guys. If you watched my review of last week's episode, you'll know that I wasn't a huge fan of last week's episode, mainly because they had 5 different storylines, and just trying to juggle all of those storylines in one episode is a real pain in the ass, in my opinion. And not that I think it's bad, I think it's just like... It's hard to do, and it kind of loses my interest. I don't feel as exciting. With the airing of last week's episode, I felt that I'm slowly, starting to slip away from the show. It's slowly starting to lose my interest. It was nowhere near as fascinating as last season. It's mainly because of all the new characters that I'm not too huge a fan of, and all of the new plot storylines that they're trying to throw on us that don't really matter to me. So that's why I'm slowly losing, my interest in the season. But tonight's episode was an improvement over last week, so I gotta give the episode that. So let's get into the review, guys. Obviously, this is going to be full spoilers. If you haven't seen the episode yet, you should not be watching this review. By the way, my voice is slowly starting to feel better. I know I keep saying that, but honestly, today and tonight, it's felt better than it had in the past couple days. But I'm still going to be drinking water. I'm starting to sound a little bit more like myself. I give it the rest of this week. But anyway... With tonight's episode, you didn't have as many storylines as last week, which I was glad of. You still had about 3 storylines, which is, about how many you should have in an hour, 40-minute long episode of a show. I wouldn't have any more than 3, in my opinion. So I was pleased with tonight's episode. So tonight's episode basically focused on, obviously, the main storyline with Norman and Cody and Emma. And then you had this whole thing with Norma and the council, trying to get a seat on the council to stop this bypass, which I still am not a fan of, but what are you going to do? And then the third subplot was the whole thing going on with Dylan and his real boss, played by Kathleen Robertson. So I'm going to save the most interesting one, of course, Norman's, for last this time around. And I think I'm going to get into Dylan's storyline briefly, then go Norma, then go Norman. So Dylan, as we all know, he got involved in that shootout last week, and I thought that scene was very silly and dumb, really. I mean, just in the broad light of day, a car starts firing them. Like, who in their right mind would do that to begin with? And the fact that Dylan just stands in front of the car and gets hit, I thought that was really stupid. But he ended up in the hospital nevertheless, and he ended up meeting his real boss, played by Kathleen Robertson, who honestly, guys, has a striking resemblance to Kate Beckinsale. I would say she's Kate Beckinsale's twin, actually. Discount Kate Beckinsale, in my opinion, even though she's a blonde. So in this episode, she takes Dylan out of the hospital and brings him to her house because he's kind of hiding out because of the whole thing with the shootout. I guess he's hiding away from everyone at White Pine Bay because of everything that happened. And in this episode, he starts to get closer to Kathleen Robertson's character, whose name escapes me, and I honestly didn't feel like going to look it up. So he's starting to grow closer to her because that is his boss, and she really, favors what he did for her brother, in that he really saved her brother. He saved her brother, played by Michael Eklund last week. His name is Zane. He saved Zane by firing at the car because they were, after him because of what he did because of this whole drug war thing, the whole thing going on at Romero's house or whatever. So Dylan, that's why she's very grateful for that. So she lets Dylan stay in her house, and there's a few kind of awkward, sexual implying scenes between the two of them. In the end, she ultimately entrusts Dylan to watch over her brother, just in case. So you could tell that she really does trust Dylan, because she feels that, you know what, he stood up to these guys who were firing at my brother. He protected my brother. I think I should trust the guy. So that's exactly what she's feeling, and that's why she entrusts Dylan to do that. And basically, by the end of their storyline, the two of them sleep together, which, Kathleen Robinson, man, ever since I've seen Scary Movie 2, I don't know what it is. She's always fascinated me in terms of her sexual appeal. That's all I'm going to say about that. Man, I remember her in that movie, but that's another story for another day. So that's basically what happened with their storyline. That was probably the least exciting of the three of them. Nothing really, new happened, except that there's now growing, there's going to be this growing relationship between the two of them because they slept together, and I honestly feel that they kind of rushed that. They kind of threw us into that too quickly, because Dylan just met her, and they already slept together, so it just felt, I don't know, felt odd to just have that happen right away after the two of them just met last episode. Don't get me wrong, they've done stuff like that in other shows, other series, so I guess it's alright. But anyway, moving on, I'll get into Norman's storyline real quickly. Now, and I've said this before in previous videos, the whole thing with Norma and the bypass, it's just not really fazing me. I don't know what it is, it's just not that exciting, guys, I'm sorry. I feel it's more filler than, detrimental to what's going on in the show. I feel it doesn't really need to be there. They gave her something to do last season, the whole thing with Shelby and all that, the relationship with Shelby. And I honestly think that was more exciting than what they're doing with this whole bypass thing. And the thing with Nick Ford, I'm not a fan of it. But anyway, as well known at the end of last week's episode, Romero tells Norma that the councilman, who she called a dick in the first episode of the season, died in some car accident, of course, right around when Norma's meeting Nick Ford, who's very mysterious. So yeah, that's why this guy died in a car accident. So you immediately suspect Nick Ford is responsible for this, and that's instantly what I thought of, and of course I was right, and he had something to do with it, but I'll get into that in a second. So Norman goes to meet him in the beginning of the episode, and she basically tells him that she really doesn't want to have these meetings with him anymore. So she kind of ends their business, arrangement, their meetings, their collaborations, whatever you want to call it, because essentially he did help her with this whole thing with the council, because it had something to do with that councilman's death. And he had the whole thing where last week, which was so dumb, the thing where he gave her that idea of how to oppose the bypass or whatever, that whole thing with the environment or whatever. I don't know, the thing was dumb, but what are you going to do? So he had something to do with this. So basically the whole episode, Norma is trying to get a seat on the council. She has a discussion with Romero, who believes that she has no chances, really. And then he brings up, I real quickly want to mention this, he brings up that thing where he's like, I can see you at night, the curtain of your room in your house, it's see-through. And I'm like, okay, Romero, way to be creepy. Why would you even bring that up? But okay. So there was that, but basically the whole episode, Norma's trying to get a seat on this council. Her friend Christine, or whatever the hell her name is, I don't even remember, comes over, that redhead chick who's kind of attractive, tells her, what, I think you could get a seat on this council. I want my brother, her brother played by Michael Vartan, his name, I forget his name, George, I think, I don't know. See, that's why the secondary characters, I don't give a shit about them. I really don't care about them at all, especially Michael Vartan's character, this Christine chick. I just don't really give a shit. But So we have to deal with him, so what are you going to do? So anyway, this Michael Vartan, George guy, George comes over to her house, and he's telling her, what to do to get ready for this thing with the bypass. To get the seat on the council. And he basically tries to reassure her and give her some confidence in telling her, just to, relax. That's basically what he says. I honestly did not care about that scene between the two of them. I don't have any care for that. I really just don't give a shit. But anyway, Norma has a meeting with the mayor, and she practices. She's been getting ready for it, and the mayor tells her, he's interviewing her, and he brings up the fact that she knows Nick Ford, and they've been meeting with each other. So you can tell that Nick Ford definitely has some influence, not only on the council and the mayor, but most of the town. So something's really going on with him. They're going to explore this, hopefully in season 2. Hopefully they don't just ditch this storyline like they did with Miss Watson. You guys remember that thing with Miss Watson and Caleb? They had the Miss Watson storyline for 2 episodes, and I haven't heard a thing about it since. Then they had the whole thing with Caleb, and then we haven't heard a thing about that since. So I think the problem with the show is that they're really rushing things, and they're going through things way too quickly. They're introducing things way too quickly, and then they're just killing off stories way too quickly without, really giving us some insight onto to a resolution in each story. So I'm assuming that we're eventually going to find out about Nick Ford's influence on this whole White Pine Bay town. And in the end, Norma does get a seat on the council, and she really didn't prove her point or show her points to the mayor. He really told her, all right, that's it, I've heard enough, you can go. That's fine, you're done. So you could tell that this Nick Ford definitely has an influence on this whole town, and we're just waiting to find out if it's going to be a payoff or not. That's basically what that. Now, the most exciting storyline of the bunch tonight, without a doubt, goes to Norman. I'm serious. That obviously makes sense. Norman is essentially the main character of the show. That's why his storylines are the most exciting, because honestly, why I feel his are the most exciting is because it connects. That's the only storyline out of every other one that connects to the original Psycho, which is why I'm a fan of Norman stuff. So basically, as we all know in the end of last week's episode, the whole thing with Norma and Cody, the brewing Norman and Cody relationship, and Norma still is weary of it. She doesn't trust it. She doesn't like the idea of the two of them being together, mainly because she still feels Cody's a bad influence, and for the fact that I completely lost my train of thought. In this episode, she finds out that Norman was drinking with Cody, which he was in the end of last week's episode when they were on their, what did they do? They went on a hike, I think? I don't remember. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of Cody. I guess I was a little bit more of a fan of her tonight's episode, I guess, because of what she did, because she was the key to tonight's episode with what happened, because she is the one that is propelling Norman's storyline, and she's the reason why we had the big climax tonight. So anyway, Norman and Cody go off on another one of their dates or whatever, and they stop in her house to get some liquor, and Cody's father wasn't there to begin with, so he comes to the house. They hear him coming. They hide in the closet, and I like this scene because Norman has another mini blackout, and he has a flashback of being trapped in a closet with Norma when he was little. Obviously, his father was abusive towards Norma, and I guess him. And in the end, it all paid off because Norman killed him in season 1, as it was revealed. So tonight, Norman has that blackout, and it freaks Cody out. So this is now the second time, keep in mind, the second time Norman has had a blackout in front of Cody. So this is going to have a negative effect on Cody's viewing of Norman. So nevertheless, they forget about it. Norman gets over that mini blackout, and they go to, excuse me, I don't know why I keep burping up stuff, guys. I'm sorry. They go to this lake, and they're sitting around making out, and meanwhile Emma and that whole boyfriend, I don't know his name, I'm not good with names on the show, they come there wanting to have a picnic. So the two couples randomly meet unexpectedly, and they decide to have an afternoon to spend the afternoon together, which only ends badly. So they decide to go swing off a rope into the lake. So Norman and Emma's boyfriend, whose name escapes me, do it, and Cody talks Emma into doing it. So Emma does that. She takes the oxygen off, jumps in, and of course, as we all predicted, this episode was very predictable, by the way. That something bad was going to happen, and that's exactly what happens. For a while, when Emma jumps in, she doesn't come up right away. It looks like they gave us the impression that she was drowning, that she wasn't breathing properly because she took her tube off, her oxygen off. So Norman dives in to go save her. He completely flips out, and he does get her out of the water, even though he really technically didn't save her. She came up on her own, but he, helps her get to shore, gets her oxygen tank back on her, and he's the only one who's completely livid at this point. Completely freaks out on Cody, starts yelling at her like crazy, goes off on her, goes nuts, and you can tell he reacted very oddly to this, and that's it with that scene. So later on in the episode, Emma shows that she's very grateful for what Norman did. He showed that she really cared, that he really cared for her. And I like that whole scene between the two of them in Norman's basement. I honestly don't, I guess I get why they introduced Cody, because they're trying to show us that if you introduce a bad girl into the life of Norman Bates, the young life of Norman Bates, it's going to have a negative effect on his life because of his mother and how she's overbearing and controlling over his life. So that, I like that. I guess I get why that they introduced Cody into the show, but I still think that Norman and Emma would make such a better couple, and I am completely head over heels in love with them. I have a major crush on her actress because she's so hot. But anyway, moving on, Cody and Emma, Cody comes over to Cody comes over to the motel to talk with Emma about Norman's blackouts, because she's starting to get concerned. Like I said, she's witnessed Norman blackout twice. She's starting to get a little concerned over all of this. So she talks to Emma about it, and Emma is now aware of this information. She wasn't fully aware that Norman was having these blackouts. Cody was really the only one aware of all of this. I forget the first reason why Norman had that first blackout. Oh yeah, it involved Caleb. Yeah, that's right. I know he had the other blackout in the closet in this episode. So Emma now has this information, and this is the turning point of the episode. Meanwhile, in this episode, Norman's getting ready for his driving test, which I can relate to. I recently passed mine back in December, so... But same can't be said for Norman in this episode, because Norman doesn't even get a chance to take his driving test, because when he gets to the test site and he's in his car, about to go off with the instructor, Norma is sitting there waiting. She gets a phone call from Emma, who is concerned and tells her that Norman has been having these blackouts and she's rather concerned for him. So Norma now has this information and she's not happy. As we all know, Norma was aware of the blackouts earlier in the season, and she kind of thought that, Norman was past this and he wasn't having these anymore. So she's not happy at all. So she stops Norman from having his road test, tells the instructor, she flat out says, she's like, "Oh, my son has been having blackouts. Should he take his test?" And the guy's like, "Well, has he been unconscious in the last 3 months?" And she's like, "Yeah." Well, he's like, "Well, no, of course not. Of course he can't take this test. I recommend he doesn't take it for another 3 years." So I'm like, oh shit, Norman's pissed. So she's bringing Norman home, and you can tell Norman's upset. Like, he's not happy at all. He wants to find out where she heard about the blackouts, and he makes her pull the car over, and he gets out and starts walking away. And you could tell that in that scene, their relationship's getting strained. They don't have a perfect relationship. And you could go from one part of the episode, the two of them are rejoicing over the fact that Norma got the seat on the council, and then a whole few, hour later, both are with Norman in the road test. Norma can completely flip out on her because of what, Cody told Emma and what Emma told Norma. So, their relationship isn't 100% perfect. So, Norman goes walking, to make a long story short, shows up at Cody's house because he finds out that Cody was the one who told Emma, who in turn told Norman, so he's obviously going to be mad at Cody. And he tells her, why did you do that? And even though Cody, she shows concern for him, she can tell she does care for the guy. And obviously this is not normal to be having blackouts like this, Mr. Norman Bates. So Cody tries to quiet Norman down because her father is home and sleeping because he was working. And at this point in the episode, as soon as Norman got out of the car, you had the score playing. I knew something bad was going to happen. I knew someone was going to get hurt or something bad was going to happen in some way. And of course, I was right. Cody's father comes out and confronts Norman because he was he woke up because of the ruckus or whatever, and he starts he puts Cody in like a pin in a scissor lock or whatever, and with his arm, and Norman flips out, and after Cody's father pushes him, who like I said is abusive and I guess an alcoholic, he kind of like pushes pushes Cody's father off Cody, and Cody's father accidentally falls down a flight of stairs, and that's how the episode ends. And you see Norman and Cody staring at the supposedly dead body, and Norman's got a trail of blood running down his nose. That's how the episode ends. Now, I did like the end of the episode, and the reason isn't because someone perhaps is dead. You don't have to get any character to die in the show to get me interested in the show. I like this episode because if I think that they're going to go in a certain direction, I think they're going to go in with what just happened, then I'm pleased, because tonight's episode would be the climax of the show. Tonight's episode would be the turning point for Norman, because Norman's in the middle of having these blackouts. That's the whole reason why he had this whole argument, this discussion with Cody. And now that her father is either seriously injured or dead, Norman is obviously, they're going to call the cops because we saw in the promo that he's going to be interviewed by the cops. And now you know that Norman is in trouble. He's not only in trouble with Norman, if the cops find out that he's having these blackouts, you could tell that they're not going to really trust him. So you could tell that, and they may even connect this thing to the Miss Watson thing. Who knows? So maybe we are going somewhere. So that's why I like the end of tonight's episode, because it's setting us up for something big that's going to happen in this season. I could tell. They're building us up. They built it up in last week's episode, even though I didn't like last week's episode. Tonight's episode, they're building up. They're building upon this whole thing with Norman, and eventually Norman is going to crack, and they're going to find out everything about him. That he's having this blackouts, and that he's not normal. That it's not normal to have these blackouts. And that's why I do like where they're going with the show from now on. My only hope is that next week's episode lives up to the hype at the end of this week's episode. The ending of tonight's episode. So guys, in the end, I enjoyed tonight's episode a lot more than last week's, even though it still wasn't great or outstanding. It still has those characters and those storylines that I'm just not 100% caring of. I really just, can't get connected with them, or I just don't, completely care about them. They are furthering Norman's storyline, which I'm really getting excited for, and I think they're going places with it, and that's what I like to see. So, in the end, I'm going to give tonight's episode 8 out of 10. It was better than last week's. It still had its slow moments in the beginning, picked up in the middle with Norman's storyline. It definitely picked up in that final scene, because now Norman inadvertently and accidentally killed someone, apparently. And I'm interested to see where they're going to go with this. And I'm also interested to see where they're going to go with their relationship. So that's really all I have to say about the episode, guys. 8 out of 10. Decent. Had its few slow moments. Had its few interesting moments, which is why, in the end, I overall enjoyed it better than last week's. And I hope that they're going to go in a different direction. Maybe they're going to impress me, hopefully, with this show. So guys, that's all I have to say. What did you guys think of the episode? Let me know down below. Answer me this, guys. What do you think is going to happen with Norman now that he just committed this crime accidentally, now that Cody's father is finally dead? And that whole weight is now going to be off Cody's shoulders because now her abusive father is out of the picture. And what do you think is going to go on between Norman and Norma's relationship? As you can tell, it's strained because of what Norma did for him with the whole thing with the blackouts and stopping his road test. What do you think is going to happen with all of that? Leave me your predictions for next week. Like I said, since I think this week's episode was the climax of the whole season, because it's kind of like the midpoint of the season, I think they're going to go places. That's all I can say. So I'm looking forward to it. Guys, let me know what you thought of the episode down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. And like I said, check out my Captain America reviews already on my channel. Bye, guys.